Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Healing the Spirit. Welcome to this week's contemplations. You may be noticing, if you are sensitive to sound quality, that I'm in a different place with a slightly different setup. I'm actually recording on my phone for the first time in ever. I just find this so funny because I've heard from many of my friends who have podcasts that they start out with recording on their phones, and I've actually never done it. But I'm currently traveling, and when I opened my software that had the recording of this week's contemplations, which I recorded a few weeks ago, I realized there was some problems with it. Some parts of it just simply did not record. And so here we are. I'm literally in the bathroom of a hotel where I'm traveling. And this is a very mercurial setup that we have here. I hope you're enjoying a little bit of that little background story. And yeah, I am excited to share some thoughts, reflections, and contemplations for the coming week. This is for the week of June 10th, 2024. Right off the bat, what I've noticed about this coming week when I sat down to feel into it was that there are multiple different transits that are happening, and they all kind of have these distinct flavors. My sense is that each person is going to feel maybe one a little bit more than the others. And so, what I would like to do for this episode is to kind of paint a mini contemplation for each of the different transits and kind of bring them together without trying to kind of tie them in a cohesive way, if that makes sense. Maybe one way to think about this coming week is that it's kind of like one of those house parties that has different rooms in it with different music. And so you might find that you are resonating more with certain transits, or certain experiences are more felt. And that's why I think it might be helpful to kind of really explore each of the different transits here. All right, so let's get to it. On Tuesday, June 11th, we have Mars in Taurus squaring Pluto in Aquarius. Overall, there is a gridlock quality to this transit. It can point to challenges in taking actions, challenges in being assertive that are really rooted in some thought forms or some ideas about reality that may require a little bit of updating. In Taurus, Mars is in exile, right? It's opposite Mars's home in Scorpio. And so we know that Mars, the planet of action, of reaction, of kind of forward momentum, and its ability to express its essential nature, which is confrontational, direct, there's a sense that Mars is impeded or dampened in some ways. Mars is currently in Venus's home, which is Taurus. And one way to think about this placement is that Mars is experiencing challenges in obtaining the resources necessary for achieving its agenda. Meanwhile, Pluto is in the fixed air sign of Aquarius, creating a square with Mars in Taurus. To me, the Pluto and Aquarius transit has shown us how our thoughts, our philosophies really shape our creations, and conversely, how our creations shape our thoughts and philosophies. This is very interesting, right? Because it goes both ways. There's a way in which our kind of mental processes impact what we create, and there's also a way in which what we create impact our mental processes. A great example for this, I think, is artificial intelligence, which really kind of saw a very public breakthrough since the beginning of this year. Through our skills, our technologies, our philosophies, we have trained artificial intelligence to mimic how we think and see the world, right? And now, unsurprisingly, we're also seeing in real time all the ways that AI is changing how we interact with our daily reality as humans, right? Think about even a year ago. We wouldn't even think, I think most of us wouldn't think about replying to an email with an AI generated response, right? But here we are now in the middle of 2024, and that's what we're doing. And all of this can happen very, very quickly. And so, some questions to consider for this transit are what thought forms, what philosophies are creating blockages and restrictions to accessing vitality in our lives? Are there any past trauma or past challenges or experiences that contribute to the creation of these thought forms or philosophies? And are there any active steps that we might be able to take to start shifting these thought patterns if we wish to recover our abilities to create and to act in alignment with where we would like to go? The next transit that I want to talk about is that on Wednesday, this is June 12th, we have Mercury in Gemini squaring Saturn in Pisces. And this transit to me is a reminder that words matter, that actions matter. Mercury, the trickster, the messenger, is confronted in a square with Saturn, which is the keeper of limits, of edges, of boundaries. It feels to me like the square is a moment of impasse, and it may feel like the stakes are higher for coming up with the correct words or phrases to describe our thoughts, our ideas, our feelings. The square is happening in the mutable signs of Pisces and Gemini, and so it may come with a slippery quality. It may feel really challenging. It may take a while to understand what the problem even is. And even when we understand the problem, it may not be fully clear what the solutions are because there may be multiple perspectives that are equally valid. When it comes to considering the idea of what the appropriate words and actions to take are, it's important to consider timing as an element here, right? Because the right words at the wrong time are essentially the wrong words, right? The right action at the wrong time is the wrong action. Anybody who's ever received unsolicited advice probably knows this experience, right? Even if an advice is correct, even when it's coming from a really good place or coming from great intention, when that advice is administered or shared at the wrong time, it may be detrimental or even harmful, right? So, a guiding question that can be potentially helpful for this particular transit are what would authenticity do or say in this moment? And what would honesty do or say in this moment, right? This question of honesty and authenticity feel really potent for this coming week because we are really working with Mercury the trickster and Saturn kind of the upholder of limits, right? And so yes, we may want to find creative solutions to kind of get ourselves out of tricky situations or stuck moments. And yet, it may be really important to be really honest about what we really want, and if the tools that we are that we have at hand, that we have at our disposal, is really the right tools to move our desires forward. It may be helpful to remember that sometimes silence is a valid option. Not responding is a valid option. Admitting that we don't know what to think, and maybe not really taking a position of leadership when we don't have all the facts, or maybe when there's an opportunity for a conversation instead, may be really helpful. And this is also reminding me of what a friend of mine recently reminded me of, which is how what she was sharing was that she and her partner would sometimes not even talk about the problems when they know that something is the problem and they started discussing it and clearly there's no way out. Sometimes the best thing to do is to kind of leave it alone, right? Not out of avoidance, but to let the energy, to let the intensity kind of come down a couple notches so that later when we come back to this conversation, we can have a productive interaction, a conversation that's actually relational rather than just two people trying to communicate to one another without trying to understand one another, right? To me, focusing on understanding rather than being so fixed or fixated on solving the problem right now may be really a skillful approach for this particular transit. On Friday, the 14th, we have Mercury conjoining the Sun in Gemini. This is what we call a Mercury Cazimi. It tends to be a pretty powerful transit. It can really facilitate insights, awareness, clarity. It can bring about communications that open up new possibilities. So, this is a reminder that authenticity is contagious. Humor is contagious. Playfulness is contagious. We have Mercury and the Sun meeting up here, but the Sun really answers to Mercury here because it's in the sign of Gemini, and Mercury is in its home sign, right, in Gemini. And so the mercurial energy is really, really strong here. And so approaching the week with the intention to have fun, to approach things with a light touch, to embrace the absurdity of life can be extremely powerful here. Sometimes the most profound quality to embody is lightness. Sometimes the most helpful way to be is to kind of stay out of it. Sometimes genuine, sincere laughter is really the best form of care. And finally, the last transit that we have here is on Sunday the 16th, and it's Venus in Gemini squaring Neptune in Pisces. And something to note here is that there's also the influence of the Libra moon, which is in a trine to Venus in Gemini, right? And so overall, there's kind of a mucky quality to this transit. When I felt into it in my body, there's a slight sense of suffocation. There's possibility for sensory overload with this transit. If there's anything that Venus in Gemini finds pleasurable or exciting, it would be evaluating options. Venus in Gemini is a placement that can never have too many options. But when the act of looking at options is not really accompanied by a clear sense of what we want, a clear sense of what we value, it can be near impossible to make a decision, right? Neptune and Pisces can point Venus to places where there are a lot of fog, there's a lot of haziness, there's a lack of clarity around value system. I'm really thinking about the Seven of Cups card in the tarot in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck with this particular transit. This card to me is an archetype that speaks to options and the problems of having too many options. Where are we getting ourselves into a pickle by having too many options, by creating too many pathways, by leaving too much room for exploration and for novelty? This transit is a reminder of I'm sure you've experienced something like this before. I certainly have, where perhaps I'm hungry and then I go into Google Maps and I start researching all of my dinner options before fully tuning in to my body and sensing into what is it that I really want to eat here. You know, I live in New York City, and so the options are literally endless, right? And so if I don't go into Google Maps having a, you know, more or less clear idea of like, do I want to eat tacos or do I want to eat burger, right? I can just spend 2 hours scrolling, falling down in this rabbit hole of considering all the options, right? Without internal clarity to kind of assess or evaluate the options against, it's damn near impossible to come to clarity sometimes. And to me, this transit can feel confusing, can feel foggy. It can feel really difficult to tune in to what we really care about, right? It may be difficult to make decisions. It may be helpful for us to consider the questions of what outcome do I want out of this situation? What outcome do I want to avoid? This is a practice that I've been exploring. I found that it's really helpful to kind of explore both the outcomes that I want and the outcomes that I don't want, because then it gives me a clearer picture of what paths I would want to take moving forward, right? As we come into clarity around what we want and what we don't want, often options naturally fall away and we get closer to seeing which avenues are worth pursuing. One last thing I'll say about this particular transit, the Venus squaring Neptune, is that this can be a really potent, beautiful transit for daydreaming. I think that if we can somehow engineer or design our day, or maybe even the the moments leading up to this particular transit, by giving ourselves a little bit of space away from needing to make decisions, I think this is a fabulous transit to just kind of let our minds wander, let our imagination run wild, and to allow our imaginative faculties to come up with something new, something novel, something unusual. To me, there's something about this transit that feels very, very supportive for that. So, if you can, try to clear your plate from any responsibilities around making decisions. So, one final note that I want to share here about this coming week is that if you are kind of paying attention to the technicalities of the transits, you may notice that there are 3 squares during this week. And traditionally, we know that squares are associated with Mars. And so there may be a quality to this coming week that feel like a little bit of friction is present. It may be a little bit of a bumpy road. And one suggestion I may make for all of you is to consider slowing down considerably during this coming week. Some tension may come up. There may be a sense of kind of an emotional gridlock or an emotional swampiness that we may not want to try to tackle right away, because maybe the solution isn't there in the present moment. And maybe consider the possibility that what you are being called towards is just to be there and just to listen to the discomfort, to be with the discomfort, and not try to do too much to try to solve things. I think when I look at the astrology here, it really feels to me like Some of these things will simply iron themselves out, and they may not even come with a huge kind of existential lesson behind them. It may just be kind of an energetic bump that we need to get over. All right, that is it from me by way of contemplations. I hope that it serves, and I hope it's helpful as you navigate the week. And if any of you would like to receive a reading, my books are reopening starting next week. I would love to either read your chart or do a divination session or do a subtle alchemy session with you. Yeah, it would be such an honor to connect one on one and to hold space for you in that way. If any of you have enjoyed this podcast, which chances are you probably are enjoying it because you're listening all the way here, I would love to receive your help in sharing it with members of your community or writing a review on your podcast app. It helps so much, and it really gets the word out there for this little project that I'm doing from currently the bathroom of a hotel I'm staying at. Okay, thank you so much. I'm sending you so much love, and I can't wait to gather again very soon. Take care.